The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
We hope you enjoyed. If you're listening on the Tony Kurre Radio Network, mission-minded, I'm sure we do every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. We do music during the weekend, of course, then we back it up with BBB Bite by Bite, a show that's specific about food inefficiencies in the United States of America through Feeding America and the Heart of Alabama Food Bank. And I know we've had this question several times at info@tonykurreradio.net. How do elections affect what you do as a business through the Heart of Alabama Food Bank? Republicans have taken it. They've taken all three areas now. And I know a lot of people, including people that are associated with SNAP, are freaking out just a little bit. Can you talk about what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so before we talked about this, and it was you kind of project what you think. So if Republicans win the White House and look at typically how conservatives look at the agriculture bill or the farm bill that comes out every 5 years, and that's waiting to be passed. And of course, that is where we get a lot of the USDA food, all the USDA food in that department, but it also covers SNAP and just food insecurity and farming and all those kind of things. And so there is a real divide in the country between politicians and between political parties as to what's the right approach. But now, and so we were speculating, well, if Democrats win, this is typically what we anticipate. If the Republicans win, this is what we anticipate. Well, now the Republicans have swept government. I received an email from a food banking online newsletter that basically pronounced the sky was falling. And the reason is because Republicans have tried to reduce SNAP, and that's typically, you could just say overall kind of it's a conservative mindset is less government or more efficient government. And I think we had just talked about on Mission Minded, with Elon Musk coming in, that is going to be one of the goals of trying to get him to do those things and create those efficiencies. But it really struck home to me because I saw some video, and again, I want to make sure the audience knows this is not a pro-Republican statement, so don't misunderstand. But I saw Oprah Winfrey stand up, for instance, the day before the election and say, if we don't win this may be the last time we get to cast a ballot as African Americans or as women or as whatever.
Yep.
And Stephen A. Smith, who's a famous sports guy, and I really don't know what his politics are, but he jumps on there, and he's African American for people who don't know, and he jumps on there and he basically just calls them all out and says, look, these over-the-top statements, look, it's codified in our law, the civil rights movement, and everybody has the right to vote and on and on and on. But if we don't get it in, if Donald Trump comes back, we've already had 4 years of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump didn't try to eliminate voting for minorities or anything else. But it's this over-the-top rhetoric that scares people, and so you create these dynamics that people feel like, oh, if I don't act now, I'm going to lose something. Well, so there's fear that's kind of being put out. People certainly in Feeding America, which there are a significant amount of people who I think would be fairly categorized as progressive. And, when the election came out, the sky does appear to be falling. I try to take a little bit more balanced approach, which is when you look historically at things like the Farm Bill, what I had said before is when you talk to Republicans, they're very much in favor of, well, we want a sustainable model that we can produce our own food and feed our own citizens. So if the world's burning down around us, we can't depend on other people to provide food for us. We have to be able to do it. So that means we We have to have enough farms. We have to have, just they have to have equipment. They have to keep their stuff upgraded, all that kind of stuff. And this is where government can come in and provide small business loans and all that. So they're very pro farmer. What they're not typically is, increasing SNAP and increasing all those other kind of things, because the belief of that it's inefficient, there's abuses, there's all of that. So let's trim it down and try to help eliminate the abuses. Now, but what's very clear to me, and that's why I take a more balanced approach, you never see, even under the Republicans are just as big as spenders as Democrats. It's just what they're spending it on.
Mm-hmm.
So the reality is, our farm bill, whatever gets approved, is going to be more than what we're currently doing. I am confident of that. Now, I'm not saying that they won't be successful in cutting a few things, but you have to understand what cutting in the government means. If you're on pace to have a 10% increase for 10 years, and you're like, okay, at the end of 10 years, we're going to be doing something 100% more, 10% each year. Well, anybody comes in and goes, you know what? I say, let's for the next 10 years, let's only increase by 5%. Okay. Well, the opposite party, and they both do it. So they're saying, oh, we were going to double it in 10 years. Now we're only going to increase it by half. So they'll go out and tell people, you're for cutting 50% out of this program.
Yeah.
And it's such an untruth. It's so misleading. It's so misguided, because the reality is nothing's being cut. But in our government, they call a reduction in what you plan to spend a cut.
A cut, yeah.
And it's just disingenuous, and it creates fear, and not just fear for political reasons, but it creates anxiety in single mothers who are trying to provide for their kids. It provides anxiety for people who are senior and who don't have enough. They think they hear that on the news, and they're like, oh no, what's going to happen to my benefits? What's going to happen to this? And so it creates all this uncertainty, and it just pits us against each other. And this is not a Democrat against Republican thing. It's not limited to that. We see Republicans do the same thing to Democrats. So I said all that to say, I'm already receiving things about the skies falling, and when my real opinion is, hey, it's not going to be drastically different than if
when is the Farm Bill going to be signed? I mean, it's been pushed
so nobody
off
knows,
so many times. Yeah.
So nobody knows for sure. It was supposed to be signed last year.
Mm-hmm.
Then, political fighting. Then it rolls into an election year. Well, the Farm Bill, for it to pass, needs to be bipartisan. But nobody wants to give the other party a win.
Yeah.
So we knew once it rolled into the election year, it was going to get punted.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tiny, tiny possibility. They have a lame duck session where they'll go back in December, so that those who are leaving office, either they got voted out or they're retiring or whatever, you see a lot of votes of conscience then that because they're like, I'm not beholden to anybody now.
Sure.
There's a small possibility that the Farm Bill gets passed. But it's much more likely that it's going to roll around to the spring into some of those sessions of Congress. But it's I think almost surely going to get passed at some point next year. And it's very important that it does. It's a crying shame that in our political system that we've put those kind of things on hold and doing these continuing resolutions. Yes, they're funding it, but it just continues to create all sorts of uncertainty with these extensions rather than just doing a budget like we're supposed to be doing.
Well, we'll keep you in our prayers for sure, and hope everything turns out the way it should. And I know where your heart is on all this. Tell people how they can get in touch with you. How can they help you? I know the holidays.
Yeah, I'd love for
up.
people to jump on our
Thanksgiving's
website,
right
or if you're local, we'd love for you to come by and do a tour, volunteer with us, get involved at hafb.org. If you're outside of our area, I really encourage you to become more knowledgeable about food banking, to connect with your local food bank or food pantry in your neighborhood. because really you have, and I'll just end with this one story. There's so many impactful stories, but we hear them all the time. An 84-year-old man walked into one of our food pantries for the first time in his life with his 80-year-old wife,
Wow.
and the reason he did is because he was paying $750 a month for his medicine, and in 1 month it went to $1,200. And so, 84 years old with his 80-year-old wife, for the very first time in their life, stood in a food bank and had to get food.
Wow. Mm.
And that's not poor planning. That's not poor choice. That's, you could say, the pharmaceutical companies or whatever, or the role that all this plays is. And I'm not looking to demonize. I'm just saying these are people who are productive citizens, and so I want people to understand. Yeah, you may not live in this space, but there's always ways you can get in your community and help people. But if you don't want to do that, and hey, we always can appreciate support. We're coming up on the holiday season. It's always a taxing time. So if somebody, through their generosity, wants to jump on our website, we certainly would appreciate that as well. So
God bless, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.